Hello, everybody, all my happy people out there. I am here to help you today by helping you awaken your relationships. So, as many of you know, I wrote a book called Awaken Your Wealth, and my lane is the money piece. But I have realized after 25 years of doing this that the money is actually just the result of everything else in your life, that it's what's going on in your personal life, in your family life, in obviously your relationships, which is why we're here today, and also in your work life. And so I have started this Awaken Your series. So whether it's your relationships, your health, your work life, your spirit, that this is about making you whole and helping you actually start to live from your heart center so that you can build your life from the inside out and not the outside in. Because we have way too often in our great educational system that we have in this country that we have actually thought that there was something outside of ourselves that was better than what we knew already on the inside. And so we need to flip that story. We need to flip that way of being in the world. And so I'd like to welcome Rita Hickman here today because she has not only helped thousands and thousands of women, particularly help in their relationships, but she's also helped me in a deep way. And any of you that know me, I'm pretty much an open book. You know, I feel that by sharing my story and my journeys and what I have gone through, it cracks it open for everybody else to feel safe enough to actually crack themselves open and start to heal. So Rita, thank you for joining me for our first inaugural Awaken Your Relationships.
Hey, how much fun is this? And I'm so excited. And thanks for, being so vulnerable with everybody. Everyone needs role models to have
Yeah.
permission to be a real human being and to love and respect themselves. And you role model it for so many women, and that's a key.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting that you're saying, that be vulnerable, because I think that's the piece. Is so many of us women have chose to just chalk it up and like, I can muscle it through and I can make it through and I can do it and I'm a survivor and I can be like the men. I can do it like the men. And we're not. The last time I checked, we all have vaginas. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like enough trying to be something that you are not, because it's so important for us to just really own our uniqueness in who we are and scream that to the world, because we were created in perfect form for who we are and what we're supposed to bring to the world at this time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think what's happened with a lot of, and I mainly work with women, is that there's been so much trauma that's happened to them that they don't know how to manage. And who we want to be and how we feel inside are two different things. So we're not in alignment. We know we want to be this higher person. We know we want to be spiritually evolved or successful or wealthy or strong or mighty, but we don't know how to do that. And we think the only way through it is to power through or push through, because we don't know any other way. But in reality, our strength, women's strength, people's strength, is their intuition, more so than powering through. And so when we start to learn how to change or shift or honor or respect how we feel inside so that it better reflects who we want to be outside, the more successful we become. And that's especially women's genius, is their intuitive self, which will guide them through all these complex situations and open doors and give them opportunities that they couldn't get by powering through.
Right. Well, and I've talked about many times that, every individual has divine masculine energy and divine feminine energy. And whether you're a man or a woman, we all have both. And even in relationships, we have, you know, one of the partners, like in my marriage, when I was married, you know, I held a lot of masculine energy. You know, I'm in finance, you know, that's the big boys club. And I have 8 brothers. So it was very natural for me to hold the masculine energy in my marriage, which kind of caused some issues because what was happening is I wasn't owning my femininity there in my relationship. That I really, it's interesting that today, you know, the gentleman who I do our Awaken Your Health series on Monday nights at 8 p.m., he talked about a couple weeks ago that if you have pain in your body right now, that those are considered like ascension symptoms. That as we're increasing the vibration of society and the earth and moving to heart-based consciousness, that you may have pain coming up in your body. And it's interesting that I've been on a, you know, 5+ year journey of owning more of this feminine energy that I have because I was so masculine because I used all that push energy to get out of the childhood that I grew up in. You know, I was like, I'm going to make something of myself. I'm going to do something. I'm not staying on the south side of Chicago. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just my heart desired something else. And I've been having these ascension symptoms all on the left side of my body, which is the feminine side of the body, according to Eastern philosophy and Eastern medicine. And have you noticed that, like with a lot of the women that you help when they're trying to work through the relationships where it shows up in their body and things of that nature?
Oh yeah. And in fact, even for myself, I mean, I'm always doing my work because in order for us to evolve, we have to be at the edge of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to be doing things which make us feel vulnerable and unstable and like we aren't quite sure how it's going to turn out. And that's how we grow and transform. And so what happens is, for me, is as I continue to challenge myself, my body will detox of the old emotion that it was holding on to.
Yeah.
And in that detox
can we
process,
focus on that for 1 second? I don't think a lot of people realize that our emotions, because I do the emotion behind money, right? So that's my stick. And we do not realize that our emotions are vibrations, and that when you don't feel those emotions of what's going on in your world, it lands and crystallizes actually in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you speak to that a little bit more in terms of like how that lands for people? Because certainly I know this, but I'm not the expert clearly, but this is what you do. You help people move it out of their bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's start with a quick definition of trauma. Trauma is when something happens to you unexpectedly that you feel helpless, that you don't have the space to process through it. So when those 3 things happen, unexpected, helpless, no ability to process, it physically becomes a trauma. And what that looks like is you get a little neural receptor in your brain, a little trauma trigger that will pop up anytime that something reminds you of that memory or that experience. And also all of the chemicals of emotion, because emotion is vibration, it's chemicals, it's a whole, it's multidimensional. There's lots of different facets to it. So the emotion, the chemicals of the emotion don't get peed out or sweated out or cried out. And so those chemicals lodge themselves in the places that we get the least amount of circulation. So we'll get a lot of chemicals in our diaphragm because we don't breathe big. And that'll start to create congestion and illness and sickness. You know, or maybe we get it in our belly because our nervous system locks up around our belly, or, you know, that power, that sense of self.
Chakra. Yep.
And so the chemicals will stay there because there's no circulation, like a stagnant pond. And so those chemicals collect. And then, as you said, it's a vibration. It's for your nervous system. Your nervous system is your electrical system in your body. And if there's if there's a break or a congestion, that electrical charge will build up and build up and build up, like, you know, walking across carpet in socks.
Right.
You know, you build up an electrical charge.
Yeah. And then you touch something and it shocks you.
Yes, that's exactly it. So you've got an electrical charge in your body around the trauma. You've got a neural receptor in your brain that only pops up when it's triggered from the trauma. And you've got the chemicals that are stored in your body from the trauma. So you react on a lot of different levels. You know, your nervous system locks down. When you process through something, when you finally give yourself the space to be okay with what you feel and who you are, and you start to move these emotions out of you, you're detoxing the chemicals and you're grounding the energy. You're getting rid of the excess energy and improving the flow of your nervous system, the energy in your body. And you actually dissolve the glue that holds the trauma trigger in place. And the trauma trigger gets reabsorbed in the body, never to appear again. So
I think that's a really big key point, right? So that once you unglue it, it's never to appear again. So because I have witnessed that people just feel like, I just keep recreating. And people are tired these days. They're tired because we've repeated these, what I would call suffering cycles, over and over and over again. So I want everybody listening to hear that loud and clear, that this doesn't stay long term.
No, we're supposed to heal. We're supposed to finish this process. We're supposed to finish this process. And so I was just talking about good relationships versus toxic relationships on our morning live stream. And I went to a great little workshop called the Love Dojo this last weekend. It's led by two of my mentors. One who's a high-level entrepreneur and his wife who's a relationship coach, and they've been together for like 10 years, and their relationship has been based on conflict. And so the whole Love Dojo was how conflict brings together intimacy, you know, makes you closer to people, especially if you deal with the conflict in a healthy way. And so healthy relationships aren't the relationships that look like a sitcom. They're the relationships where two people show up with the intention to keep coming back to love, even though all of their traumas are triggered. That's the healing. The healing happens when we get triggered, but then we get love, either from ourselves or someone else. Right. And when that happens, the process, it closes the loop. The trauma disappears. The chemicals detox out of the body. The charge gets off of the nervous system. The trauma trigger goes away, and you're lighter and healthier. But if you don't do that, or while you're being triggered, you have all of these crazy physical symptoms. And some of them are your body detoxing. You know, if you're doing healing work, it's now going to dump all those chemicals into your bloodstream, and your bloodstream's going to go, oh, this is toxic, you know, or you're going to feel like your nervous system is shaking. There was one woman who came to me a few years after she had lain next to someone, that a friend of hers that had gotten killed. And she wasn't able to reconnect with that. And through some coaching and then having her there and giving her a safe space where she could remember this, she had a big release, but the release came like 2 days later, and it came in the form of shaking for like 5 hours straight, because it was such a trauma getting off her system.
Well, and you know, I've had this experience. So there's been a couple times where, you know, I have had experience. You know, I've done some shamanic ceremonies down in Costa Rica that I shook there. I've done, I actually just recently was introduced to this concept called TRE, which actually got me into my body and I shook. So what's interesting to me, that when we have this stored, that this detox isn't necessarily coming in packages that we would naturally think of. Like we think of sweating and, you know, normal elimination stuff that we would talk about, but it comes in different ways that I have really learned in the shamanic work that I've done, that detoxing can be crying, it can be laughing. Like one of my first shaman ceremonies I laughed. And it was right after my divorce. I had so much PTSD going on. And all I did was, after meeting these shamans and they did this healing ceremony on me, that I found my laughter again. I found my cackle. And anyone who's ever been around me knows I just have this loud cackle that just makes everybody else laugh. And there were 70 people in this room, and it just was like this wave of laughter. And because we've so, as a society, have gotten away from laughing without drugs and alcohol accompanying it, right? And it's like, no, it doesn't have to be that. Like, we don't have to find a distraction to loosen ourselves up enough to laugh again. And it's like, oh, it's so beautiful to detox and laugh. Like, just like there's laughing yoga that's out there, you know?
I've had clients where I've just rested my hands on their belly and they've laughed for an hour and a half. And then they peed really well afterwards because
there's the normal elimination.
Yeah, because everything was so loosened up that it could move.
Well, that is a true statement, that it actually, your body becomes stagnant when you have these emotional blockages. And we don't realize how much that the relationships that we choose to not show up as ourselves in, because so often we'd like to blame the other person. And I will tell you, in my divorce process, there were plenty of conversations that I had where I was blaming him for everything. And in hindsight, you know what? It takes two to tango. And that was a really hard thing for me to realize, you know, because I worked so hard, but I absolutely participated in all of that. And we are the creators of our lives, and we create the positive and the negative. But sometimes it's really hard for some people to swallow, you know, but we have to realize that, you know, you said something earlier, we don't show up in our relationships in a way that don't create trauma points or reinforce traumas that we had in our childhood, because we're not okay being who we are. You said that earlier today. And that to me is a buzz in relationships, because I know for me, I knew for years I was not being okay with who I am. I was buying into a story that I was not good enough and I was not worthy, and I, you know, needed to do more and be more, and, you know, and that just amplified the dysfunction. And
right. Yeah. There's some layers on that. I like to put the lens of the body over everything, because it makes it feel like there's something I can do about it. So what tends to happen is, as a child, we get a trauma. The trauma creates discomfort in our body, and we don't know what to do with it, and we don't have the tools or the ability to process through it. And so we create a story in order to protect ourselves from feeling that, to try to keep distracting ourselves so that we don't revisit and touch that pain. And many times our body won't let us touch it until we're ready, until we've got enough safety things in place that we can access it. So in the meantime, we come up with stories to help ourselves cope. And it's only when we get the trauma out of the body that we're able to put down the story. Until we're still in a place of fight or flight, until we're back into our rational, frontal, balanced whole self, intuitive self, as long as we're in that fear place, we're going to come up with stories because we don't know how to make ourselves feel better.
Right.
And the neat thing is when you start using body mind tools that have been around for, you know, throughout all of these shamanic cultures, but were kind of hidden in the culture. It never got mainstream, and science didn't support it. Science is starting to really support and validate a number of these body technologies that they address the problem at the core, which is get the trauma out of your brain and off your nervous system. And then all the stories, all the illnesses, all that stuff, it drops away.
Right.
And you don't even have to go into the story or go to therapy for another 10 years and figure out how you have daddy issues and, you know, you were never loved enough and I don't even know who I am. You don't have to go that route. I mean, you can, but that takes 10 years. But when you say, oh, I'm in a fight or flight thing, I need to do something to flip the switch so that I can heal and move forward. As soon as I feel uncomfortable at anything, I give myself permission to clean it up, and then I do something to clean it up. And there's a million things you can do to clean it up. It just has to be something that makes you feel good, that takes you out of the fear, sympathetic nervous system into the I'm okay, everything's okay, parasympathetic nervous system. It could be a walk, could be anything.
And you've taught me that when I am in a fight or flight mode, so in essence, just to kind of share with people who are watching, that when you're in this fight or flight mode, the way you've explained to me, and by all means interrupt, that it's something from your past. So I've shared before that when I was younger, I was sexually molested by a Catholic priest when I was about 5 years old. And I didn't even remember this until I was in a hypnotherapy appointment about 4 months after my marriage ended, because I didn't know why these patterns were repeating and why I was playing this trauma out even in my marriage until I remembered this. So this was so stored in my amygdala back here in my past trauma that anytime I went into fight or flight in my marriage, it really didn't have anything to do with my marriage. It had everything to do with that trauma from that Catholic priest who, thank God, spent 20 years in prison.
Yeah, which you couldn't even remember.
Exactly.
Right.
And I am so clear. Like here's a really great example. I am so clear that I had that experience in my life because money and sex are all second chakra. So my soul came in to do this work. And I had this experience that is as obnoxious as it can come, to do something to help heal other people, let alone the gift to gab to actually talk about it, because a lot of people won't talk about that.
Oh,
but
yeah,
I have zero problem talking about it. And then all of a sudden you've taught me that, oh my gosh, even the things in my relationships today as I move forward, like, how do I not repeat those patterns? Because I'm not the same person, because now I'm aware, I know how to address the trigger points, right? Mm-hmm. And so I won't repeat the patterns. Can you show our audience, because havening has been super helpful to me.
Right. Okay.
This is a very, very simple thing. And I am not joking, everybody. I literally get this question all the time of, well, I should go to therapy. And, Rita, you and I have never talked about this, but you said exactly what I know to be true, because I sat in a symposium with Deepak Chopra, with the brightest PhDs around the world. And one of them stood up there and said, if you do this kind of work where you address the subconscious mind, that what would have taken 10 years to get through from a psychotherapy perspective can now be done in 30 seconds flat.
In 30 seconds 30 seconds. Less.
And you don't need to hire somebody and pay huge bucks. You don't need to so I don't care how much money you have or how little money you have, you can do this. And I've had these big burly men, one of my friends, he's a professional bodybuilder, and he's sitting out there going, you're going to make me do what? I'm like, get over yourself and start.
Right. Just do it. Just do it.
And he played. He's laughing his butt off.
And fine, cool. Time. I tell people it's also get in their head.
He was no longer triggered.
Yes.
And okay, so show everybody, because I think this is the greatest gift that we can give everybody watching this video.
Right. And these two tools are not mine, but they're tools that I had been searching for my entire life, but specifically in my career. And I did the same sort of thing when I do body work with people, but these tools, which have been secretive and locked away and only,
because nobody could figure out how to make money on them.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, it's like $10,000 to do this thing. I mean, it's just insane. In high level, things things.
Totally.
So what happens is when we get frustrated or irritated or aggravated about anything at all, then whatever trauma is associated with that, which you could be nonverbal, you know, whatever, that trauma trigger pops up. And I like to say it's like a pop-up turkey timer. It pops up in your brain.
Right.
And you flip over into your amygdala, into your fight or flight, your sympathetic nervous system. And when you do one of these two technologies, or there's thousands of things you can do, but these two work really fast.
These ones are easy, cheap, and super effective.
Yeah, and you can even do it in the middle of an argument. And I'll talk about that in a second. So the first one is havening, Havening. Look it up, not mine, but what it does is it flips your brain. It forces your nervous system to go from sympathetic to parasympathetic. So from irrational to rational, from overwhelmed to intuitive. And so you notice if the intensity, you know, is rising, if you're angry, hurt, irritated, judgmental, you kind of give it a number, 0 to 10. You know, is it 8? Is it 9? Is it 2? You just give it a number. And then you stroke your arms 20 times, your upper arms. So I'll show it. Let's do it as a demo with you.
Okay. Like the right and left brain.
We'll do it together. Okay. Talk to me about something that gets your gander up.
Well, let's talk about what we talked about this week.
Okay.
So I was served with legal papers again from my ex-husband. Okay. And it brought me right back to my triggers and my PTSD from feeling like I was under assassination again I keep trying to do the right thing. And then all of a sudden I'm now being slammed with more legal papers. And it triggered everything from the past. So I called you up and, you know, so this is my trigger. So when I go to that place, I'm probably a 9 out of a 10. You know, you helped me the other day pull it down from there, but when it initially happened, it absolutely, and right now I'm probably about a 7.
Okay. So you're at a 7. So we'll take our right hand and we'll put it on our left bicep, and we'll take our left hand and we'll put it on our right bicep. Yep. And we're going to stroke our upper arms 20 times, and we'll do it together. So you're at about a 7. Okay. Yep. Ready?
Ready.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, where is it now? Is it still at a 7?
I'm at a 2.
Okay, do you have any insights about the whole thing?
Calmer. Yeah. And it's just amazing at how it's so simple. And you know what? My niece said to me the other day, we were at Father's Day at my parents' house, and she says, Aunt Julie, I've repeated the relationship stuff that you repeated. And she just left the father of her child. And he is responding very similar to how things went with me. And I stood there and I did this havening with her. And she's like, Aunt Julie, what are you talking about? And I go, come on. And I even noticed and that it was her masculine is way stronger than mine. And I noticed that when she was doing it, like her masculine side, she wouldn't naturally let her arm go all the way down. And I was like, no, all the way. Come on, you can soothe both sides, because it's the right and the left brain, right? That you want to crisscross that right and left brain and get it back in balance, the analytical and the emotional. And the other thing that you told me is that what it's doing is it's aligning your heart meridian. So it's getting you out of your traumatic fight or flight brain and back into your heart.
Back into your heart, your head brain, your heart brain, and your gut brain, because those 3 brains together are your intuition. Most of us live in our head brain, think. If you're more empathic, then you'll live maybe more in your heart brain or your gut brain. But when we when we're triggered, we're usually stuck in one of them. like my
Yeah.
stomach will lock up. So when we're not triggered, when we soothe ourselves like that, our heart brain, our head brain, and our gut brain are able to talk to each other and inform each other. And so now you have three brains telling you what to do, not one paranoid, crazy, obsessive, wounded one that still thinks that, you know, the lion is chasing it.
Right. And Sue just said on the Facebook page, she said, I'm already in a great mood right now, but I did that with you anyway, and it just made me smile and giggle. It feels good.
Yeah.
And
Doesn't it feel good?
because you may not know that you're not aligned, you know, but and today when you had me do that, I assume I woke up fine. You know, I wasn't in full throttle fight or flight, you know, but it's true. Like it even calmed me down because you don't necessarily, we are so used to not being in alignment that we don't even know what it feels like to be in alignment. It almost, that being in alignment feels foreign because we're so used to our suffering cycles, which obviously then impacts all of our relationships, whether it's your employer relationships, your personal relationships, your family relationships. It's all across the board because we attract the same bird in all those aspects.
Well, it's because we're trying to resolve the unresolved issue. And so we recreate these patterns because because it's not processed through yet, because it's still hanging out there. But we don't know how to process through, or it's not safe enough to process through. And so that's how we end up in the suffering cycles, not because of anything that we're choosing, not because we're like, hey, I'm an idiot, I'm going to choose to suffer because clearly I'm broken and there's something wrong with me. No, it's just that there's something that's unprocessed. And as soon as you notice that you're not feeling good, you do the havening. And if you can't do it on your arms, and don't forget, it's the skin on skin touch too. That's great for calming down the nervous system.
Yeah, so you're getting those nerve endings going.
Yes, exactly. That's why I got into body work, because touch was the only thing that would calm my nervous system down. But if you can't do your arms, you can also do your hands. That works. 20 times, however you want. Just, even washing your hands or touching your face. Yep. Touching your face 20 times.
Wow.
Those calm down the nervous system. And when that happens, you're able to think clearly again. So the next one that I love, and I use the havening when I'm feeling sad or tired or a little wounded. And I use something called TAT points, T-A-T. It was pulled together by Tapas Fleming. And it's acupressure points that flip your nervous system from sympathetic to parasympathetic. So it's your thumb and your ring finger, and you put them on the inside of your eyebrows, and then the middle fingers kind of rest in the middle. And then you take the other hand and you put it at the base of your skull. Now, sometimes people think, whenever you try to calm down, you say, oh, I need to think calming thoughts. I need to be peaceful. Well, I can't do that. Screw this. I'm pissed off. So you don't do nothing, right? Because you're like, this isn't working. I can't meditate.
I feel like we're sending ourselves to Mars. No.
Right. Yeah. So instead, people don't have to be in the right state of mind. They can be talking about anything they want to talk about. In fact, I tell people to say the alphabet in their head, or say it out loud. You don't have to be anything special or smart or intelligent or balanced or anything. You just have to hold these points. And as you hold these points, you notice that you get out of that tense, scared, angry place, and you start seeing more clearly. And I'll just hold them as long as I feel like it. And then you get these insights, these understandings. And I use it even in the middle of big conflicts. In fact, this is the genius of it, okay? So if only something that reminds you of your trauma can put you in the correct energetic space to heal the trauma, right? Because you can't heal the trauma if you don't go back to the trauma, if you're not in the trauma in some way, even a ghost of the trauma, you have to feel it. Like a conflict will. So if someone's fighting with me, my trauma triggers are being pushed hard.
Right.
But if I haven, or if I do my trauma points while I'm triggering in the middle of this conflict, I'll usually say something like, know what? I want to stay present to this and I need to calm down. So I'm going to do this thing, but please keep talking. And who cares if they make fun of you? It doesn't even matter. You're calming down. Your nervous system is dialing down.
It's
and
like on an airplane, put your oxygen mask on first, then your kids.
Yeah, exactly. And it allows you control over your emotions. So your emotions don't force you to run away or hide or fight back or people please. Instead, you stay yourself and you stay in the emotion.
Right.
And so you're able, because you're staying to it, you're able to detox it. And you may cry a lot or laugh a lot or fart or burp or, you know, all sorts of crazy, or sweat. Yeah, have great sex, you know, all sorts of things.
You know what, can we talk about that? So you've taught me about that one too. So, and let's talk about the fact that that obviously a sexual experience is something that opens you up to vulnerability, but it also opens you up to deep healing.
Yes. And
so that when you have a sexual experience where you're vulnerable and it goes to that place where your trauma or your trigger that you, and I'm not probably going to say it the right way and you can correct me on this, but that in essence, being in that vulnerability, it actually then flips and replaces the trauma point with a good memory and a good groove in your brain like that. And I will tell you, I have experienced exactly that when I'm in the place of that vulnerability and then all of a sudden I have all that shaking that happens, that's the trauma leaving my system replaced by this beautiful experience.
Yeah, because now your trauma isn't sobbing uncontrollably for weeks on end. Now it's some divine connection, physical connection with God that feels really great.
Well, I can't think of any other better way to see how to solve your problems.
It's wonderful when you find somebody that has a good intention, and can hold the space and also triggers you a little bit, because remember, it has to be triggered first. So it has to be someone that it's part of this pattern, it's part of this chemistry and electricity. So they trigger it, and instead of directing it towards a fight, which is okay, I just don't personally like to fight, or directing it towards some addictive behavior, if you agree, it can turn into sexual play, which allows you to still recreate this experience and finally express all of the emotions that you've been feeling, to go there, because now your nervous system is on red alert. And what feels better than being at a high state of arousal and releasing it? Right.
I agree.
So when you're in that high state of emotional trauma arousal and you're with someone who's willing to give you pleasure through it, it's a game changer. It's a manifester. And in fact, when I have really great releases that way, while I'm releasing, I think about my goals and my dreams and my visions. I think about what I want to manifest in the world. So I'm going, oh God, yes, I'm making $1 million. Yes, I'm in Aruba. Oh, yes. It's hilarious.
I have read that in multiple places that is the time, that is like the ultimate peak for manifestation, because you are open, you are vulnerable, and it's aligning you with high vibration to get you there. And who would have thought, who would have thought that, if you want that $1 million, that's the time that, like, and being a woman, it's like, and a woman who does money for a living, it's like, you want to talk about money while we have sex? Like, I'm not really sure how that goes together.
I want to talk about the priest molesting you while having sex. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Like, well, then it would just be like, well, and for me, that would be an experience of like going, like, I naturally want to close back up.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, no, trust.
Trust, open, go. Get out
of my
Make money! Win big! Oh, yeah. So, I mean, in
Who said
reality,
we can't have fun getting rid of our traumas?
oh my God. Yeah. Why be crappy about it? So,
You
I mean,
can't write this shit.
I know. So, the keys to freedom from a
Yeah, because
dysfunctional wiggly healer is find somebody who triggers you, but still cares about you and loves you. Find somebody who triggers you. Yep. Their deeper intention is to help. Have them trigger you from your deepest, darkest, scariest emotions as part of your sexual play. And then use that tremendous release that you have because you're highly aroused and they're pushing you over the edge. Use that energetic release and direct it towards creating what you want out of your life and putting it out in the universe with like full force gale winds behind it.
So for some people, this may feel like this is like off the charts and over the edge, but I want to remind people that everything is energy. Einstein proved it. E=mc². So your thoughts, your words, your feelings, all of it is vibration and energy.
It's measurable.
Yes. And so it's super, super, super important to understand that this is as high vibration as you can get. If you're in the middle of ready to have an orgasm, that's a high vibration.
Yeah. An orgasm based on trauma, which has been controlling you your entire life subconsciously.
Yeah. Right. Boy, we just went to the deep end in our very first session here.
Well, I mean,
it's
why not?
Great. I'm so glad we're just peeling the onion and just being open because people need this like air.
I know.
We have been closed-mouthed and prudish way too long, and it's time to talk about the priests that are sexually molesting. It's time to talk about all this trauma that was shut down for generations that is in our DNA. Whether it happened to you or not, it's still in your DNA.
Oh yeah, it gets passed down generation to generation, the reactions and the triggers. They have science that shows that Holocaust survivors, their DNA was changed, and so the DNA of their children was different, and the DNA of their children was different. Because
and so you may not even know, I always tell people this, like you may not even know, like you're like, this whole experience makes no sense to me because it could be something that happened in generations prior that you're holding in your DNA.
Yes. Yes.
And those of us who have chose to be here at this time, I believe we're the ones we came here at this time to clear all these patterns. That's what's going on in the world right now. It's about clearing those patterns that don't serve the individual, the communities, the countries, and the world at large. And it's time for all of that. It's moving from that egoic mind to the heart-based consciousness. And and we all deserve it because we're all one, and I talk about that, my daughter, for her 7th birthday, she said, "Mom, the only thing I want is for you and Dad to sing happy birthday to me at the exact same time." And I was like, how am I going to do that? Because in our divorce agreement, it says we have to have separate birthday parties. And it was my year to actually have her birthday party. And I just saw the look on her face and I go, I have no idea how we're going to get to this point, but it's time for us all to move past the trauma. And so we invited him over, we had him over, and I put boundaries on it. And to see the look on my daughter's face when we were singing happy birthday to her, she had one hand on her dad and one hand on me. And she was the happiest 7-year-old I've ever seen. She didn't have a big party. She didn't have, and you know what? I didn't know how to get through my trauma to do it. I just knew I was going to do it and I was going to walk through that. And so I just want to share with everyone that's out there that regardless of what's happened in your relationships in the past, we can let that go. We can, and I'm not saying stay in the relationships because, Rita, this whole conversation started that we were talking about the fact that domestic violence is up 60%.
60%.
Since
because of this pandemic,
started.
It's off the charts.
And so there may be relationships that you need to leave. for your own reasons. But you've also taught me that you can also work in those relationships and they can be very healing, pending that both parties come with that intent.
Yes.
And
it has to be that deeper intent.
And my hope, and I trust that that's why we're doing what we're doing, because nobody wants domestic violence. Even the person who's committing the violence, all they're doing is repeating trauma that was taught to them at some point. And the only solution to all of this is love and compassion. And love and compassion can be holding extremely strong boundaries with those who are helping create the trauma, because maybe you're farther ahead in your consciousness than the other person, and maybe that you're supposed to lead them to healing.
There's always a leader in the relationship. There's always there was 𝐻𝐼𝑒 She was a channeler in the 50s, and she's a little bit of a religious bent, more than was me, but that was the 50s. And she said the person who is more evolved in the relationship is the one who's the relationship leader. It might not be fair, but it's just the way that it is. And so if we're going to make a change in the world, we have to own that leadership role, and we have to learn how to heal ourselves, and then help the people we love heal too, by standing for them as they unpack their baggage and work through their pain and trauma. And the only way to do it is we get back to that havening, is that love. And that's what closes the loop and processes it through. Because remember, out of your control, helpless, and you didn't process through. It stayed in your body. And so when you bring the love to someone, it gives them a space to process through it. And as lovey-dovey and fuzzy-wuzzy as this sounds, and people will be like, I tried it and it didn't work. It's because it takes a lot longer than you think it does. It takes longer than you want, but a lot less time than you think. Like, you think this is never going to happen. It's always going to be this way. But if you hold a higher vision of the people you're in relationships with, whether they're your exes, your kids, or whatever, and you keep believing in them and helping them get back in touch with who they are, even if it's just on a superficial level so you can get along with them,
right?
They'll become better citizens of the planet, and we'll get a healthier community in the world.
Exactly.
So we have to work on that stuff and lead other people.
Well, and regardless of whatever happens, today in my world, I have really come to that place that the only response to everything is love and compassion. Because you know what? One of my coaches said to me, Julie, it's time for the Fighting Irish to leave the building. And I'm as Irish as they come. And you know what? She was right. She said that to me 4 years ago, before all of this started. And I didn't really actually know what she meant there, but oh my goodness, the journey I've been on over the last 4 years is that, you know what? I have a lot of piss and vinegar, and I can fight with the best of them, and I can hold my own and stand in my power. But that's actually not what it's about anymore.
Right. That was your trauma response.
Yes.
There are 5 different body postures, let's say, or physical responses when we're in trauma. One is disassociation. So you leave, you go someplace else, you visit your happy place, and you're disconnected from reality. So you feel flighty, brain fog, can't focus, aren't sure where you're at. The second way that people trigger or react is aggression. Of course, that's a normal one. And a third one is where we entrain with someone else. We become so hyper tuned into them that their every breath and move, that's hyper codependent.
Yeah.
A fourth one is where our thinking becomes very rigid. Our actions become very rigid, very linear. No, it's yes or no, black or white.
Right.
And then there's one more. What's the last one? Hang on. I had it in my brain. Endurance, where we just put our head down, nose to the grindstone. We just got to get through this. Okay, we're gonna do this. And I've done all of those. they usually inform me as to what level of stress I'm at. If, depending upon what it is. And so if you
Certainly.
notice you're in any of those patterns, it means you need to pause and do your havening. You need to pause and do your trauma points. So when you're fighting, it's just your unconscious wanting to protect you. And if you notice that, just do something to love it.
Yeah,
and you love it
and it's like I said, the response to any of it is love and compassion.
Mm-hmm. Now, the thing that confuses a lot of women who are in toxic relationships is they believe love and compassion looks like sacrifice and being a martyr.
Yeah, that can't be the case.
And it looks like suffering. And love and compassion, according to Brené Brown, she said that the most compassionate women are the ones with the best boundaries. Because if you set and hold boundaries, then you're not being triggered and you're able to be compassionate towards someone else. But if someone's constantly infringing on you, constantly making you feel resentful or hurt or angry, or like you have to withstand something, you can't have compassion for them because you're too distracted by coping with what's going on inside you. That's how we get that disconnect between who we want to be and how we really feel, to tie this, up to the beginning. That's where the disconnect comes in, because how we feel inside is different from who we want to be. And so instead of trying to get better at controlling it, we need to actually change how we feel inside so that it's congruent with our higher self.
Yep. That makes complete sense. And I think we really just need to hold that safe space for ourselves.
Yes, that's the most important.
Because I always talk about that. For you to move forward, you have to remove all that shame, blame, guilt, and judgment you have about all the past. And you know what? All we have is the present moment. And the present moment lives right here in our neocortex. Mm-hmm. And I always say, even from a financial standpoint, that I have found to be true across the board, is that you have to clean up your past while living in the present moment and plan for the future all at the same time.
Yes.
Because there's too much, particularly in the Western world, where it teaches us to go for the future, go for the future, go for the future. I mean, one of the beautiful things about quarantine is it shoved us all into the present moment. Mm-hmm. It got out of our craziness of the push for tomorrow without living today. Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to find a lot of people who are going back into these phases of reopening the economy and stuff like that, that they're going to find that, God, I really enjoyed living in the present moment. Mm-hmm. And then let alone you're needing to clean up your past, because if you wound up in quarantine and you were really, the PACT system that I walk people through, the second step in that process is the A, and that's accepting the reality of what it is that you are currently living in. Mm-hmm. Whether it's financial or relationships or your family, personal, health.
Sometimes that's way too scary for people. And in fact, that's usually what happened. All of that was too scary. And so it was easier, less threatening to do something else than to deal with the acceptance of what the reality was, because there was still a lot of unknowns. And what if it's true? What if I am broken? What if there is something wrong with me? What if it is all my fault?
Well, and I'm a perfectionist. The day before I filed my divorce papers, I called up one of my coaches and I said, why can't I sign these papers? And she said, because Julie doesn't fail at anything. And I was like, oh. And I sobbed. I cried for probably an hour after that, because I don't fail at anything. I've always succeeded at everything I put my mind to. And this one was not meant to go that path.
And next time, if you want, just another option is you can get out your vibrator instead.
How do you know I have one? No.
You don't?
Just kidding. That was too much information for my mother if she's watching. No.
Sorry, Mom.
No, I'm just kidding. Totally fine with it. My dad actually found it one time when he was looking for the kids' binkies, and that was a little embarrassing.
There you go. So, I mean, you get to redirect this energy any way you want.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, and it's beautiful. So I am so grateful. I can't believe an hour went by so fast.
Yeah, it's like a time vortex.
It really is. But when you're in the flow and you're in the present moment and you're doing what you're meant to do and bring to the world, that's what happens. Time flies by. And so, Rita, can you tell everyone how they can find you, that if they want to work through stuff or work on one-on-one coaching with you, how they can do that?
Absolutely. So you can go to my page, 𝑘𝐼𝑟𝑒𝑚assage.com, or you can look up my Facebook page, which is Narcissism Healers for Peace. And I do live streams every day. You can message me from there. You can sign up for my email list. You can learn about all the different women's groups that I run and coaching programs. And so 𝑘𝐼𝑟𝑒𝑚assage.com is the main spot, but you can see all my live streams on Facebook.
Excellent. And thank you all for joining us for our first inaugural Awaken Your Relationships. And don't forget, Monday, we have Awaken Your Health again at 8 p.m. Central. And we'll soon be having, in the next couple of weeks, Awaken Your Spirit. We're going to do some energy work with someone that I've worked with for years to help us energetically and vibrate and shift. By all means, if you need a roadmap to follow, my book, Awaken Your Wealth, all these tools are available for you on juliemurphy.com. And Rita, I look forward to doing more of these with you. And
oh yeah, this will be a riot.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.